Hi, welcome to this short introduction to the 1204 desktop. I'm going to try and cover a fair amount of material, so it might not be that short. This is the standard desktop that we ship in Ubuntu 1204. There's only two differences here from standard ship desktop, and that's this thing down the bottom, which is just showing the keys that I'm pressing, so if I don't happen to mention them, you can see what I'm pressing on the keyboard and also what I'm doing with the mouse as well. And this thing up here in the top right, which is the application I'm using to record the screen. So let's get started. This is the standard desktop, as I said, in 1204, and the main components of the screen. Over on the left hand side here we have something called the launcher. We have a menu bar across the top of the screen up here in the top left, and in the top right we have an area reserved for what we call indicators, and then the big expanse of space in the middle is the desktop. So let's start with the launcher. The launcher has a set of buttons. These are pretty much the standard buttons you get on a delivered installation. And if we start from the top, the first one launches what's called the dash. We affectionately call this button the Ubuntu button. Sometimes you'll see it called the BFB, the big freaking button. But it launches this thing, the dash home. And I'll go into more detail about the dash home in just a minute, but that's what that button does. You can also access the dash by pressing the super key or Windows key on your keyboard, and it opens the same thing. So either clicking that button with the mouse or pressing the super key will open the dash home. After that we've got the home folder, which is where you can explore all your files and folders. The application here is called Nautilus. So Nautilus is our standard file manager. Next we've got a familiar Firefox web browser, which I'm sure many people have already become very familiar with. And after that we have LibreOffice, the writer, spreadsheet and presentation applications. Then we have the Ubuntu Software Center, which is where we obtain new software. So you can install games and applications from in there. Next is Ubuntu One. Ubuntu One allows you to do file syncing and music synchronization up to the cloud in order to give you backups and synchronization between machines. Next we have system settings. This is like the control panel for Ubuntu and takes you to where you can configure your Ubuntu desktop. Next is the keymon. That's, as I said, not default. That's this thing down here in the bottom right. And then we have what's called the Workspace Switcher. I'll come back to that in just a minute. And finally, down the bottom here, we have the trash. Now, as you open applications, this launcher will fill up with icons. You can also lock icons to this launcher, and we'll see that in a bit more detail a little bit later. Another useful thing to note on the desktop is if you, I mentioned that you press the super key to launch the dash, but if you hold it down for a little bit longer, you get this list of keyboard shortcuts as an overlay. It's quite a useful reference. It'll pop up over the top of anything, whatever you've got open, so it's quite a handy reference. As soon as you let go of super key, it goes away. So just hold that down and you get a nice keyboard shortcut reference. So let's go back to the dash and look at that in a little bit more detail. So the dash opens by default with what we call the home lens. You can see the little house stroke home we have down here. And the lens has a bunch of categories. Recent applications that I've used, recently opened files in the middle, and down the bottom are things that I've downloaded probably via my web browser. Now these categories show a small number of results. There's only 6 results there, but you can see there's a little indication that there's more results, and if I click that, it expands it up and you can see the additional hits for that category. The same goes for all of them. When you open that up, you see more. You can also expand the dash by maximizing it to take up the whole desktop, and then you can see all of them, and now the little notification that there's 3 more has disappeared because they're all displayed on screen at once. You can go back to the standard size dash just by pressing this little button here. And you can also navigate the dash using the keyboard. So I can just press the arrow keys to go down, Alternatively, I can press the tab, which will tab through each of the categories as well. And if I press enter on the category, it opens the category up and collapses it, so I can toggle showing and not showing those. And similarly, I can use the keyboard to navigate to the applications and the files and the downloaded items, and I can open them. I'll see that a bit later. So that's the dash home screen, which you get to by clicking the big button in the top left hand corner. Now this is what's called a lens, and there are a number of other lenses. We have an applications lens, which focuses on just showing recently used applications, applications we have installed, and applications that are available for us to download. There's also a keyboard shortcut for that. If you do Super A, it takes you straight to applications. So if I wanted to have a look at all the applications on my system, I could go Super A and then click the installed, and then I see a giant list of all the things that I have installed on this system. And if I want to filter this, I can do so. So if I was looking for the CD burning software Brasero, then I just start typing. Similarly, if I type CD, it finds CD burning software as well. The next one is the Files lens. The Files lens shows files and folders that you've recently opened, stuff you've downloaded, and also some common folders that you have on your system. So again, let's maximize that up, and you can see all the folders that I've got in my home directory there that I've recently used. The next lens is the music lens, and in here you can search for music that's on your local machine. So that will appear in the top category up here. If I search for some kind of song like price like that, you can see there it finds a song that I happen to have on my local machine, and it also tells me that that's in this album, which is also on my local computer in my music collection, but also has a category down here for stuff that I could buy online. And that would be via the Ubuntu One music store. If I press escape, it comes out of the lens. So those are nearly all of them. I think actually there's one more that I missed, which was the video lens. And the video lens is much like the music lens. It shows you videos that you've got on your local machine, and also videos that are available online that you can click through and watch in a browser, for example. Some of the lenses also have filters. So if we go to the dash home, there's no filters on this one, but if we go to the music lens, there are filters, and you can see that by up here in the top right hand corner it says filter results, and this allows you to filter the results that you get from your search. So I searched for price, I think it was. There we go. I start searching for price, and if I want to, I can say, well, I'm actually only looking for disco music that's got those letters in, and you can see that it filters out all the stuff that's not disco. If I click it again, it goes back to show me all genres, and the same with sources and the year of the music. I can fiddle around with these to refine my search, and it's up to the author of the lens as to what filters are available. I'll just press escape to come out of that. We also have quick lists over here. So if I right click on my home folder, you can see a menu appears, so I can go to my music folder, for example, and see the files that are in there. Similarly, I can right click on the dash home and go directly to the music lens. So right clicking on an item in the launcher takes you to a quick list, and the quick list defined by the author could take you to some shortcut within the application. Let's get rid of that. So we've also got a bunch of applications here, and these should be fairly familiar to any of you. The one that's a bit quirky for many people is the Workspace Switcher. And when we click the Workspace Switcher, we get a zoomed out view of multiple workspaces. So I can have applications open on any of these workspaces. And if you just click that once, it zooms out to show you all workspaces, and then click it again to zoom back in. There are also keyboard shortcuts for this, Super S, gives you this spread out view of everything, and Super S again will zoom back in again. You can also use Control Alt and the arrow keys to move from one workspace to another. And this is most useful when you've got a number of applications open. So for example, if I've got a copy of my home directory open here, and I've got a web browser, and maybe I'm writing a document as well, and my desktop starts to get a little bit cluttered, what I can do is take this zoomed out view and I can move things around just by grabbing hold of the windows and spread out all my work to different workspaces. If you want to switch workspaces, as I said, you can either use the keyboard shortcuts or you can just use the mouse. So if I right click on this desktop, it'll switch to that one. If I go to the Workspace Switcher again, right click on this one, it'll switch to that workspace. Okay, let me close down everything. So back to the desktop. I think that's enough about the launcher for the moment. At the top of the screen there's a menu bar. If I open Firefox, you'll see very briefly at the top of the screen for a couple of seconds the menu bar appears and then disappears again. I'll just show you that again. If I open Firefox, above the Firefox window there's the menu just up there, and then it disappears. So by default it hides. You can make it reappear by moving the mouse up and the menu reappears, or alternatively you can press the keyboard shortcut Alt F10 and that makes the menu appear, or if you seems if you hold down Alt for long enough the menu appears as well, and then you can use the keyboard accelerators like T here. For Alt T will bring me the tools menu, and they work like conventional menus in any other application. What we also have up in the top right hand corner is the indicators. Now the standard indicators we have are the messaging indicator, and once this is configured it will give you notifications of emails, instant messenger chat sessions, social network interaction, and notifications of Ubuntu One file sharing. Next to that we have the network indicator, and here we can configure our wired and wireless network, mobile data and VPNs. The next one is the sound menu. Here you can mute the sound, change the volume. You can use the scroll wheel on the mouse for that to change the volume. You can also control the media player, switching tracks and play and pause, the basics. And also you can navigate to the further sound settings where you can do even more customization of your sound settings. The next one is the date and time indicator. In here it shows you the calendar and the time, and then there's further settings in another window where you can set the time zone and add additional time zones to here so you can see the time in multiple places around the world. Next we have the user menu, or the me menu, or me indicator, and in here you can see I'm logged on. It's got a little tick next to it, and that's the current session. But I can also switch to another account, so if there are multiple people who use this computer I can switch to them using this. There's also a guest account. Guest account is very useful for testing purposes, because a guest account is home directory is created at the point when you switch to it, and it's all thrown away again afterwards when you log out. So you know it's a clean session. That's quite good for testing what a standard desktop should look like and how it should behave, for example. You can also create additional users in here as well. Finally, the last indicator is the session indicator, and in here you get menus to lots of different areas, like setting the display and configuring all kinds of other areas of the system, and also logging out and suspending the machine. I think that's everything about the indicators for now. Incidentally, it doesn't matter if you left click or right click on these. You'll notice down the bottom I'm left clicking or right clicking. The same behavior happens. It doesn't matter which way you click. Now we also have something called the HUD, which is a good way to search menus. And the best way to illustrate the HUD is to just explain via a demo. So HUD stands for head-up display. So let's open an application like the movie player, for example. So I've got the movie player open here, and maybe I want to change the aspect ratio while I'm watching a video, or there's some setting in the menu somewhere. So to invoke the HUD, I press Alt, and then I can just search for aspect ratio, and you can see as soon as I start typing AS, it finds aspect ratio from the menu of the movie player, and I can just show that. If I go up to the top here, you can see aspect ratio is there in the menu, but by pressing Alt, I can just very quickly get to the aspect ratio setting without having to know where it is in the menu. And then I can use the keyboard to navigate to items in the HUD, or just click on them. And if I had a video open, that would have changed the aspect ratio. You can also search the indicator menus. These are actually menus up here that you see underneath the indicators, and I can search those from the HUD as well. So for example, if I wanted to mute the sound, I could press Alt and then type mute, and you can see there it says sound mute, which actually means from the sound menu choose the mute option. So if I click that, you can see now up here the sound has been muted, and again I can do unmute. So very quickly I can mute and unmute the sound without having to move my hands off the keyboard onto the mouse, which is very beneficial, especially in applications which are very menu rich. So let's have a look at starting applications. If we use the dash to start applications, which is one of the recommended ways, I can search for applications just by typing. So I have recently used the movie player, but by just typing MO, it appears right near the top. Similarly, if I wanted to add a printer, I could just type PR, and printer is the first one, and then I just click on it or press enter, and it will open the first hit. And you can see there's my printers. You can also open applications just by clicking the items in the launcher. So I can click on the home folder, and you can also right click and use the quick list to open a new instance of that item, or you can middle click. So if I middle click, I get a new copy of that window, and every time I middle click I get a new one. So I've now got 4 copies of the Nautilus file manager open. You can also drag items to the launcher. Oops, I've killed Keymon. Let's open that again. You can also drag items onto the launcher to customize the launcher. So you can actually grab hold of an item by holding the mouse down and move it around like this. So you can customize the launcher, but you can also add things to it. So for example, if I wanted to add the movie player app, I could just search for it in the dash, grab hold of it with the mouse, and then drag it down here and then place it anywhere in the list that I want. So I'll just stick it down here. So now the movie player is always in my my launcher, and I've got quick access to it just like that. You can also drag and drop files into applications. So if I click on the dash and look for example, a video file, I can drag a video file over the top of the launcher, and you see only the things that are receivers for that type of file. So the movie player can open movies, but OpenOffice can't open movies. So if I drag over the movie player opens and starts playing the video. You can also remove applications from here. You could just simply drag them down to the trash can and they disappear. Another thing that's interesting to note about the launcher is once you do open a bunch of windows, you'll notice there's some indication in the launcher that showing which apps are open. So the little pip on the left hand side, the little triangle on the left hand side, indicates that we have somewhere a copy of this application open. There's no copies of Firefox open, there's no LibreOffice open, there's no little triangle next to them. As soon as I open a copy of LibreOffice Writer, you'll see a little triangle appears. And in addition, if you open multiple windows, so I've just opened a second LibreOffice Writer and a third, you get an extra pip up until the maximum of 3. Once you go beyond 3, it only shows you 3 to indicate you have got lots of them open. I would think once you've got 3 OpenOffice Writer windows open, you probably know about it. What it also shows you is which is the active window. So the little triangle on the right hand side shows that this is the window that currently has the focus. It's currently in the foreground. If I open LibreOffice, you'll notice that the triangle on the right hand side has moved down to LibreOffice because that's now in the foreground. And as I switch between the apps, you'll see the triangle will flip between those two applications, indicating which app currently has focus. In addition to that, there's one final thing it shows you, and that's whether there's a copy of that application open on another workspace. If I use the Workspace Switcher, Super S, and move that window over here and then go back to this workspace, you can see there is a triangle next to the home folder, but it's not filled in. That means there's a copy of that open, but it's not on this workspace. So LibreOffice is open and on this workspace, so you have that triangle. If I switch to this workspace, you can see now we've got a filled in triangle for Nautilus here and an empty triangle next to LibreOffice. And in fact, I can switch between these applications and it will flip desktop as I do that. Speaking of switching applications, let's open a few applications here so we can illustrate this a bit better. You can switch between applications just using the buttons in the launcher as I showed you, so I can just click on these and it will bring whichever one I click on to the front in focus. You can also use the standard keyboard shortcut Alt-Tab, and Alt-Tab brings up this switcher where I can Alt-Tab through each of the applications that I've got open and bring it to the front, but I can also go backwards the other way as well with Alt-Shift-Tab, which goes back around the loop. If I have multiple windows open, so I'll open multiple LibreOffice windows, I've got 3 presentations open here, then what I can do is not only use Alt-Tab to switch between applications, but you'll also notice that next to the LibreOffice presentation application, there's 3 little pips to show there are 3 windows open, and if I go to that with Alt-Tab, you'll see it zooms out and shows me all 3 of those windows, and I can continue past that and go on to the next application in the list, or while I'm on that screen I can use Alt and then the key above Tab, which is on my keyboard layout a backtick, to switch between them like that. So Alt backtick allows you to switch between multiple open windows of one application, whereas Alt-Tab lets you switch between different applications, but also between different apps of the same application once you hover over that application. Okay, let's get rid of some of these. You can also do Super S if you've got your applications spread over multiple workspaces like this, and there's also Super W, which spreads the applications out like this within one workspace, which is helpful as a kind of zoomed out view. On some platforms it's called expose, so I can switch between my applications just by doing Super W and then a single click on the application to switch between them. Finally, let's look at some brief customizing features of Unity. First of all, the size of this launcher by default is set, but it is changeable. And if we either go up to the session menu and choose System Settings, or you can choose the System Settings item here, or you can search for settings. You know, there's loads of ways to get to it. Within settings, there is appearance. In fact, you can search for appearance in the dash to get straight there. Appearance, there you go, straight to it. And you can see down here the launcher icon size is set at 48 pixels, and we can make it larger should we want to. We can also make it smaller. It'll go down to about 32 pixels, but that's the default, 48. As well as changing the size of the launcher, we can also change the behavior of the launcher. By default it's always on the screen, but we can change that by flicking under the Behaviour tab this switch, and now it hides. And by default you have to push against the left hand side of the screen in order to reveal the launcher. You can also press the super key and the dash appears, and then you get the launcher as well. So there's numerous ways to bring the launcher back out, but by default, if it's not got the focus and if there's not a mouse currently sat over the top of it, then it will hide. You can also change where you have to put the mouse in order to reveal the launcher. So now that I've changed it to top left corner, bashing the mouse against the side of the screen doesn't work, but putting the mouse in the top left hand corner of the screen does reveal the launcher. You can also tweak the reveal sensitivity, so that's, you know, how hard you have to bash against the side of the screen in order to reveal the launcher. But by default, it's always on screen. There's also a couple of settings relating to having multiple displays. So if you've got 2 or more displays connected to your computer, they'll be listed in here under displays. I've only got one screen on this system, and you can choose where the launcher appears. Either appears on one specific display, or you can have it, which is the default, to appear on every display. So by default, this launcher appears on every single display, but if you want to, for example, have 2 screens side by side and you don't want the launcher in the middle as you traverse the mouse from one screen to another, then you just set this to whichever screen you want to have the launcher on. There's also this option down here for sticky edges. Sticky edges means that when you move the mouse across the launcher, as you're traversing the launcher, it'll slow the mouse down in order to make it easier to hit the launcher. And some people don't like that, so the option is there to turn that off as well. I think that's most of the things I wanted to cover. There are a few other nice things to do with window management. For example, with a window open, if I want to maximize it, I can double click the top bar and unmaximize it by double clicking the top bar again. I can also have a window maximized by dragging it to the top of the screen, and then grab it and drag it down to unmaximize it. I can split the screen by dragging a window to one side and another window to another side, so I can split the screen with 2 applications there. Another less well-known one is to push a window to the back of the stack. If you middle click the title bar up here, it pushes it to the back. So you'll notice the Nautilus window comes to the front. If I middle click the top of this one, it pushes that one to the back, and Firefox comes to the front. There are lots of other keyboard shortcuts, lots of other ways to navigate around Unity, and as I mentioned earlier, hold down the super key and you can learn loads of them. Hope that's been useful. Any questions, just let me know.